Hey there, welcome to the channel where the Doge reads to you. A lot of the stories that I read on this channel usually involve a single player, or DM, that just makes the tabletop RPGs they are in a bad experience for everyone involved. Though sometimes there can be an entire group that makes the experience a nightmare for a single player. Much like the examples in these next D&D horror stories. But first, here is a graph. This graph shows that a lot of you watch the videos, but haven't clicked that subscribe button. So why don't we take a moment of time to allow you to go ahead and click that button and bell, that way you can get notified when I put out new videos. It's right there. It's just one click. Alright, thanks to all of you that clicked it. You made my tail wag. And those of you that didn't,
I see you!
But with that out of the way, let's get right into the stories. I was kicked out of my group, and I couldn't be happier. By Reddit user, Kill the Bard. I was gaslit, plain and simple. The longer I've been out of my 7-year D&D group, the more I've been able to come to terms with, and I really don't like this term, toxic people. This focuses on the DM and his spouse. Let's call them Jay and Martha. And let's work on Jay, the DM, first. All of these are in no particular order. Our stats were sometimes drawn from a hat, rolled 3d6 down the line, or something like that. He would allow Martha to switch her stats, however, in secret. I once roleplayed my way to getting magical watches for the party, which could be attuned with after meeting a certain requirement. I was the only one who never got to attune. He reasoned that it was because my watch was a prototype and didn't have that feature. He later told me that he forgot. Backstories were mandatory. Literally, never once used mine. I asked to make a skill check regarding persuasion, intimidation, etc. He'd make me act it out. I love roleplay, but sometimes I'm not good at it. I wasn't allowed to roll. I had to act it out. So I never took those proficiencies again. On the flip side, when my 18 intelligence rogue thought of a good idea, he says I couldn't do it because I don't have engineering. I told him that that wasn't a skill, and tying knots around spare jail bars with 2 ropes wasn't exactly the hardest thing. He said my backstory didn't have engineering in it, so I couldn't do it. And the most important one, out of game, while Martha was asleep, and I would stay the night because I couldn't drive, he'd wake up and flirt with me. He also slept on a couch in the living room like I did. I rebuffed him for literal years. His advances made me exceedingly uncomfortable. I would leave D&D for months and ignore their text, only to break down because my dice were still there or something. Later on, and more recently, he and I would text at night because I was having problems regarding the passing of my boyfriend and my declining mental health. He'd flirt with me, and mentally, I couldn't cope. I had a breakdown over it a few times, once even going to the hospital for a week. Eventually, his spouse found out about the flirting, kicked me out of the group, and called me quite a few dirty words over text. Speaking of which, Martha was no gem herself. She was incredibly abrasive and intimidating. She didn't have many friends, couldn't hold a conversation, and hid her insecurities by name-calling, and also by doing things like this. She would read my character sheet to attempt to exploit secrets of my character. I was once given a secret flaw from failing a saving throw. Every time I would pass the DM a note about it, she'd interfere. She'd mad dog my character, and wouldn't let me leave her sight when we had downtime. She didn't like the way I played my character. What she didn't like was my character saving money to purchase a magic item, instead of spending my share of the money on her. She didn't like how I played my other character, a thief. She had a 16 intelligence, and was the de facto puzzle solver. She wanted to be the puzzle solver. I told her it was a group effort, that I was usually just the first to solve. She told me I needed to give her answers if I wanted to be fair, or take more time. She thought I was asleep on her couch once, and told Jay and my boyfriend I pissed her off by helping the Ranger PC pick spells. This was when 5e first came out, and the spells I suggested to the PC were also clerical spells she could cast if she prepared them. She never mentioned this when I was actively asking for spell suggestions, or if that was stepping on anyone's toes. Also, when she thought I was asleep, I pissed her off because I didn't like the salad we ordered as takeout and threw about half of it away. I bought the salad with my own money. I paid for it. I had to break her out of prison after she killed a noble in a sauna. I never even got a thank you. She'd argue with Jay's decisions for so long that nobody wanted to play anymore, and she'd get personal. Once, her character died. She cried, which is okay, but she vehemently disagreed with her death so much and fought so much against it. She reasoned either we all die or she somehow get resurrected. 2nd edition elven fighter she was, almost impossible to bring back to life. Jay then reneged her death. She would complain when I would text her a D&D related question, trying to help another player. She complained that the player should have been directing her questions towards her. She would get one-on-one sessions with the DM. This would result in her, usually human fighter or cleric, obtaining fire-breathing attacks, special animal companions with magic properties, meeting important NPCs we would never get to talk to, etc. She wouldn't let me have a party item. I wasn't going to use it, I just found information about it I wanted to verify. It later became hers, and she never used it because she was a fighter, and this was a wand. I was creating a bard who carried a short sword. That was wrong. She abrasively told me that wouldn't be fair because she was creating a rogue with a short sword. Apparently, we both can't carry an extremely common weapon in case we find a magic item. I started being the party healer after her cleric could never seem to heal me for more than 1 to 3 HP, while healing herself or my boyfriend for full every time. Out of game, I seemed to upset her. An example is when my boyfriend and I were out golfing and she called him to hang out. He told her we could all meet for dinner, but he'd be busy for a while. She told him, quote, "Dump the bitch and have fun with your friends." She'd get upset that I'd bond with certain PCs and NPCs without her. I can't comprehend. That's all I can remember for now, but I really have learned no D&D is better than bad D&D. I still wonder if I was the problem. I don't think I was. And I don't think she was either. It sounds to me like this couple were dysfunctional to say the least, and they brought it all into the game as well. For Jay to hit on OP out of game, and then for Martha to be that bitter towards OP, it definitely sounds like there was more going on behind the scenes, and they just took it out on OP in and out of game. Then for Martha to call OP's boyfriend and tell him to break up with her is a step too far. Which I would have left the group then and there, which thankfully it sounds like OP did. On to the next story. Teammates keep spell controlling my character. By Reddit user ThrowawayMental321. I started playing this online campaign with 3 other people who had joined the DM before me. Let's call them Bard, Druid, and Arcane Trickster. Well, I thought that since their party already had a decent set of spellcasters, I'd add a rather tanky Barbarian to try and balance it out a little. So, since I rolled a 6 for one of my stats, I chose to make Intelligence a complete dump stat, and turn her into the somewhat stereotypical dumb but buff half-orc lady. As one can imagine, my character wouldn't be the best at picking up social cues, or conforming to the expectations of polite society, as somebody who had thus far in their lives only ever solved their problems with brawns, not brains. So I roleplayed her being a bit of a harmless mess when it comes to social interactions, like trying to give the Queen of the Genasi a fist bump as a sign of respect, or showing subpar table manners when being invited by Lord X to dinner. Mind you, I never did anything that would actually jeopardize the success of a mission. Well, the other players decided that they didn't like that kind of roleplay. So, Bard just decided to cast Suggestion on my character before meeting an important character, and just made her stand in the corner and stay quiet, so that she wouldn't embarrass them. and the other party members were all for it. Druid and Trickster actually started using their own control spells to prevent her from actually interacting with any relevant NPCs, noble or not. Even when I asked them, straight up, if they were alright with my character and roleplay style, or if they'd rather I roll up someone with smoother social skills, or have me play her as a more serious character. But they said no. They liked my character, and they were just training her. They said it was all in good fun, so I tried to laugh along with them and act like I was in on the joke. But really, now the only meaningful interactions I'm able to have are fights. I truly feel like they're expendable toy in a way, only able to watch them have fun while I'm shoved to the sidelines. Maybe it's my fault, I don't know, but nearly every session leaves me feeling like shit. On the other hand, the DM is putting in a lot of work, and I don't want to leave them struggling to find a new player again. Update. I have left the group by now. I tried to tell them that I didn't enjoy the constant control spells they were using on me, and asked them to please refrain from that in future games. I posted that in the general Discord chat, and Bard, as well as Druid, started alternating between each other, telling me what a jerk move it was on my side, to stir up pointless drama and paint them as assholes for some basic in-game fun. Both the DM and Trickster didn't respond at all, despite them being able to read the whole exchange, so I just ended up apologizing for the short notice, and told them I wasn't interested in staying in this campaign. I hate stories like this one. I can understand using controlling spells on NPCs to make progress on story or quests, but to use them on a fellow player at the table, and in a constant way, is kind of a dick move. Not only do you take away the player's ability to roleplay their character the way they want, but can make the player feel singled out. That is why, if and when I ever DM, I will not allow controlling spells in PvP in any way, unless the player getting controlled allows it. And then for OP to speak up about it, only to be met with vitriol, it's a good idea for OP to just walk away from that game. No D&D is better than bad D&D. But let's move on to the next story. First IRL campaign immediately goes poorly. By Reddit user Doge. Here's the story of my first and only attempt at an in-real-life campaign. It's not as dramatic or fucked up as other tales, but even years later, it still bugs me, and I think talking about it will be cathartic. The fluff. I usually play online, but I wanted to try playing IRL. I went to a local game shop where they hosted one-shots every weekend and joined a couple. It was weird playing with strangers with my social anxiety, but mostly fun. Usually it was a store employee DMing one-shots, but one of the regulars was given permission to run a longer campaign at the store on a different day, and I signed up. The story stars me, the DM, the druid, her partner, and another player I'll call Buddy. We all showed up for session 0 with character ideas, hashed out basic expectations and rules, and rolled for stats. Then the next week, we played the first session. Nothing had really stood out to me as a red flag, but I got the feeling that Druid didn't like me. As I said, I have social anxiety, and I tend to get talkative when I'm nervous. I was definitely chatty, especially since I wanted to make a good impression, and I think it was annoying her. Another possible thing was I wanted to play an evil gnoll. I had an idea for an interesting paladin of a god of revenge, and that required homebrew. I would have been fine with a no, but the DM said he was willing to work with it. We needed a cleric more than a paladin though, so I rolled up my gnoll war cleric. Neutral evil, but in a I want to be powerful and you guys will help me get stronger, so I'll come with you and cooperate kind of way. I had zero plans on being a nuisance, and I didn't play them as anything but helpful. I don't remember Druid seeming bothered, but in hindsight, maybe it was a little much for a new table. 2 strikes weren't enough though, because I also had the 5e rules mostly memorized. I was new to the table, but quite familiar with the game, and the first time Druid cast a spell, I piped up to mention she was calculating damage incorrectly. My usual group does things like that all the time. The rules are complicated. and we remind each other of small things like that a lot. I didn't even think twice until Druid gave me a glare that sure made me shut the hell up. I was pretty quiet the rest of the session, but it went fine after that. The meet. All in all, I guess I made a terrible first impression on Druid in particular. Other players seemed pretty okay, and I'd hit it off with Buddy pretty well. The game was run over Google Classroom, don't ask me why, and I chatted with Buddy a bit over the next couple days. 2 or 3 days after the first session, I found I couldn't access the campaign's classroom page. It was just gone. I honestly assumed the campaign had been cancelled, since the DM seemed a bit in over his head. At least, I thought that, until Buddy shot me a message asking what happened. I had no clue, and told him as much. Come to find out from Buddy, Druid had gone to the DM with an ultimatum. Either kick me from the campaign, or Druid and her partner were quitting. I don't know any details beyond that, and can only guess why. Because I was removed without any communication. No message from the DM. No explanation. Nothing. The dessert. Now, this was pretty upsetting, obviously, and my feelings were pretty badly hurt. I can be talkative, but my social skills are fine, and I'd really wanted to get along with all of them, even Druid. But I did get a little bit of vindication. Remember how the DM was given permission to run the campaign at the shop? Well, it turns out, kicking a new paying customer, who was coming to the store regularly to play D&D and buy things, without a good reason and not even telling them, did not go over well when Buddy told the store manager what happened. The store manager was pissed at both the DM and Druid. In the end, if I recall correctly, Druid either was asked to leave or resigned of her own accord, along with her partner, and I think the campaign was cancelled entirely because they weren't allowed to run it at the shop anymore. The store manager messaged me to apologize, and I didn't blame them, but I never went back. I still wonder exactly what did it. What line had I crossed that bothered her that badly? If I'd been able to have a conversation, or if I just wasn't compatible with the group, alright, I get it, but not even getting to know exactly what I did wrong irritates the hell out of me. I can understand that not every player is compatible with every table, though to kick someone out without letting them know is kind of shitty, and they could have at least told him why. I too know what it is like to have social anxiety. I am quite the opposite though, in that I am usually quiet until I feel comfortable around someone new. Sometimes you just gotta give someone a little time to get used to you, and then you might come to find that they become a good friend. It sounds to me that Druid may have been kind of an asshole, and that one slight of correcting a rule was enough to make her hate OP. Though, that is just what I gather from this story. What do you think? Let's move on to the final story of the day. Lawful Good Paladin loses his powers because of chaotic neutral party. By Reddit user Luis Falcao BR. How a table full of chaotic neutral characters managed to forcefully turn my lawful good paladin into an evil character and ruin his entire life. In Session 0, the DM explicitly forbade us from making evil characters, so I decided to make a lawful good elf paladin, since in this setting, elves were a race on the brink of extinction after their goddess got defeated by the god of Minotaurs, who forced her to join his harem. That was some hentai shit. I decided that my character's goal was to free the elves and their goddess. Meanwhile, the other players just made chaotic neutral characters. One girl even wanted to build a harem of elves for herself. I still don't understand how my character could stand her. The problem started by the end of the campaign. The big bad was going to invoke an army of demons, so we were asking some NPCs for help with fighting the demon army. This one old archdruid lady refused to help us, which made my character very angry, since for him it was unacceptable that she wouldn't help them to literally save the world. So when he mounted his pet wyvern to leave, he flew close enough to the ground so that the wind of his wyvern's wings would blow the archdruid lady's tents away. She was unharmed, but her stuff went all over the place. After this one action, the other players started insisting that this wasn't a lawful good act, and that I should lose my powers over this, which the DM agreed, more because of democracy, since he didn't really buy their argument. This made no sense for me, since they had done much worse in the past, like killing people who insulted them, or torturing people for information, but I never questioned their alignment for it. I hated that, but decided to roll with the punches. So I started the process of trying to make him become an anti-paladin, so I could get powers again. After a ritual, I gained dark powers. That was some Sith Lord shit, and was ready to join the fight again. The thing is, I had this mystical sword that was supposedly the most powerful artifact in the world, although I only managed to awaken its power a couple times to save our asses in the last moment, probably the DM's failsafe for when we messed up. Since I was now an official chaotic evil character, the whole party turned against me and demanded that I surrender the sword. To be honest, I never intended to have a PvP situation, or to betray the party. I just interpreted this change in my character's personality as him deciding that he was going to cross some lines and adopt a more the ends justify the means kind of mentality, but still keeping his goal of saving the world and freeing the elves. But I guess the rest of the players just thought chaotic evil equal enemy. They forced me to give them the sword or they would kill me, which really bothered me since I'm completely against this type of stuff when I run my games. In my table, if someone states his character is going to punch yours, I won't ask for an attack roll. You're the one who's going to decide if the punch lands. This behavior continued through the following sessions, with the party preventing me from doing anything, talking to NPCs, getting loot, etc. I don't think I need to explain why this made my experience extremely tedious. If that wasn't enough, my powers were completely useless against demons. The whole fire against fire thing is a lie. So I was basically a fighter with less martial feats and no battle maneuvers. Well, we saved the world. Most of the elves decided to join the harem of one of the legendary heroes who saved the world, the girl from the start. And my character just gave up and went to live as a farmer for the rest of his miserable life. God, I hated that campaign. TLDR, I made a paladin, only for the rest of the party to make him lose his powers over the most stupid thing. Firstly, it's understandable that a good person would get frustrated with what happened, given that they were trying to save the world. To say otherwise would just make this character very two-dimensional. Yes, it might not be becoming of a lawful good character, but nobody is perfect, and at least no one was injured. Secondly, the DM should not have listened to the rest of the party and make OP's paladin become chaotic evil because of democracy. They are the DM, and they call the shots. And like OP said, the other characters did much worse than the paladin, but never were forced to change alignment. Here's hoping that OP can find a better group to game with in the future. Have you ever tried joining a tabletop RPG group that just turned out to be a nightmare? If so, let us know what happened in the comments. If you have a story that you would like to be read on the channel, feel free to post a link in the comments, on the channel subreddit, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, even those of you who
didn't click subscribe.
Until next time.